Hi, I'm Anthony from bestbluesguitarlessonsonline.com, and this video will explore what you should be able to learn during the first year as a beginner blues guitarist. And the first year on guitar is really essential, and a lot of people don't get it right, because if you learn inefficient habits, these can later come back to you and haunt you. So we will look at the very best things you should learn and you should know about during the first year as a beginner blues guitarist here. So the first thing to know about is that a lot of people get this wrong, and they start picking with holding the pick with 3 fingers. So the first thing we will look at is guitar technique. It's one of those things that you should get right during the first year, because later, once this habit is developed, it becomes really harder to learn it in another way. So alternate picking, building accuracy on things like scale runs, technical exercises are really important. So this is the first thing to really get a good look at, holding the pick only between the thumb and the index finger, so not with 3 fingers like I did the first year I started playing guitar, and then it haunted me like after I discovered this wasn't really efficient, because the motions of the right hand need to be developed efficiently, and then when we are holding the pick with 3 fingers, we are establishing too much tension in the hand. So exercises like the picking exercises that a lot of guitarists practice as warm-up are also very good to focus on the first year as a beginner blues guitarist. What is good to know though is that here at the first fret we are covering a lot of area for the fingers, and if you're still developing your stretch in your hands, this is also something to look at, the fretting hand stretch and developing this. Sometimes it can be a good idea to focus on these technical exercises, but practice them a bit higher up on the neck, and then shift later on towards the first fret, because as I stated before, these cover much more stretch and the fretting hand fingers. So the second thing that you need to be aware of is the scales you can use to play blues. And of course, it's a really good idea to get into a habit of improvising as a beginner blues guitarist, and just learning the basic scales you can use as a beginner blues guitarist are really a good idea, of course, like the minor pentatonic scale, the blues scale. But not only using those in one position, but also then later on during your progress in the first year with the guitar, it's essential that you are able to visualize the fretboard in a way that you can easily shift from one position to the next. So for instance, if you're improvising over here in those positions, the basic blues scale, the minor pentatonic scale, position 1, that you're also able to shift higher up on the neck. And here I'm jumping, for instance, from the first position of the minor pentatonic scale to the 4th position of the minor pentatonic scale. And this is something that we also need to look at during the first year when you're a beginner on guitar. And these position shifts aren't only good to do in one key, but you should also practice them in different keys. So now I'm practicing in the key of A, And I'm starting my first position of the minor pentatonic scale here on the A note on the low E string. And then when I jump to the fourth position, I know that the root note of the scale is located here on the fifth string, 12th fret. This is also the A note. And a lot of beginners miss this really essential knowledge that you need to learn the notes on the fretboard. So the third thing to learn, that's really essential as a beginner on guitar, is the notes on the fretboard. And granted, this is boring stuff to practice, but if you only practice this a couple of minutes per day, you will get better at this. And you will also see that it is kind of fun, because you're improving your guitar playing, and that's fun, right? So if you're playing a couple of minutes per day and you're focusing on the notes of the neck, you will see yourself grow on guitar. And you can see here in the image that these are all the notes on the neck, all the natural notes, which basically mean that they have no sharps or flats. And these are the notes to focus on in the beginning. The most easy way to learn these by heart is just to focus on one string at a time, but it's not the only way you should study the neck of the guitar. And I have an article on my website about this exact thing, so you can check out the link below here and the video on YouTube. You can check out that article where I have videos and instructions on how to learn the notes on the guitar. But basically we want to be able to locate, for instance, all the A notes on the neck of the guitar. And you won't see the point of this in the beginning, but it's really essential, because when the other minute I jumped from this first scale position to this scale position, we need to locate the root note of the scale. So we need to learn the notes on the guitar. And if you do this later on and you're playing already for a couple of years, this is fine too, but it's one of those essential things. If you start on early, then you will develop your insight in how the neck of the guitar works much better and much faster. So the fourth really essential thing to be focused on during the first year on guitar is that you also look at the picking hand's motions, and you want to establish the alternate picking technique. So this is basically going up and down with the pick. And on one string this is fairly easy, but doing this on all 6 strings is a really good area to focus on. Because when you're practicing scales, you want to also use this alternate picking, at least in the beginning as a guitarist. And a lot of people here also establish the wrong ways of picking, and they do everything with down picks, like this. Which is perfectly fine if you also know how to do alternate picking and you also give attention to using alternate picking. But if you only use down picks, or I've even seen people use only up picks to play, which is of course fine as well, but we also need to establish this alternate picking technique. And the reason why we want to do this is because it's much smoother, it's much more used than using only down picks or even up picks. So alternate picking, and during the first year as a beginner blues guitarist, is a way of picking for the picking hand that we need to focus on. So the fifth thing that's really important as a beginner blues guitarist is to establish a bag of tricks, a bag of licks. And a lick is a melodical fragment that is coming from a scale, so that's why we need to first learn our scales. And if we know the notes from these scales, like here the minor pentatonic, then we need to experiment with them to use them in our improvisation, those scales. but it's also a good idea, especially for blues guitarists, to learn the cliche blues licks, like for instance. These are all cliche blues licks and it's good to learn them. You will find some of them here on the YouTube channel. I have videos about these licks and also an article on my website. I will include the link also to these below this video so you can check them out. And these are basically really easy licks, like this much played lick in the key of E. And I even made them more complex than the ones that on the article on the website. You will see they are pretty easy and pretty doable to learn, if I'm not mistaken. They're in the same position, but they're less complex. I think it's something like... This is a really much played lick, and it became known by Freddie King, one of the three kings of the blues, and you should learn the licks from Albert King, B.B. King, Freddie King, and many other guitarists. But you will also see that there aren't like thousands of licks to learn. There are just a couple of really essential licks that you should study, and if you learn those licks, you will see that a lot of guitarists really use those. And stealing is a really great way to further the blues tradition, but every guitarist has stolen licks from other guitarists, so you should steal them as well in order to learn the language of the blues and to further the blues tradition. So we have a lot of licks that a lot of guitarists use, like Eric Clapton, B.B. King. Everybody's using B.B. King as licks. And so we should also learn those during the first year. So number 6 of the essential things you should learn the first year as a beginner blues guitarist is learning to improvise. And a lot of people think they aren't ready for improvisation. Well, let me burst that bubble. You are ready from the moment you play scales. To experiment with those scales. It's not like magic, it's not some gift that you need to be born with. It's not talent. Of course, everyone feels like their improvisation sucks in the beginning, but you can just think of a toddler, and in the way that a toddler learns to recognize words from his parents, and by trying them out, they get better at speech. So that's the same way the first year you're starting to learn to play blues guitar. You just experiment with sounds coming from a scale, and it's no more magic than just this. The moment you start to learn scales, you should experiment with them and not turn yourself into like a crying baby and think, well, I'm not ready to play, to improvise, because there will never be a time when you feel ready, because you've never practice this aspect of your playing. So really important, if you want to be good as a blues guitar player, you should learn to improvise with the scales as soon as you learn them. And you can tell yourself, well, I'm not sure how to do it, but it's really easy. And of course there are exercises that you can look at, and with the students I'm working here locally in the schools or at my website online, bestbluesguitarlessonsonline.com, there are plenty of resources that we're working on to further improvisational skills. But the first steps are really easy. First step is just take one scale that you learned, like the minor pentatonic scale, and then just try to form a little lick, a little phrase. And a lot of people try to, use the whole scale, but one of the easiest ways to play great sounding licks is just to restrict yourself to, for instance, just 2 strings here. For example, in the minor pentatonic scale, we can use the highest 2 strings. And this is a simple lick. I just used a little blues bend here. and a little slide at 5th fret. Without these techniques, improvisation is also really cool, and it's probably where you should start, where you want to start off, because if you don't know the blues band already, then you should start, of course, with just playing the notes, and they won't sound really great without these phrasing techniques like this little blues band or this slide, but it gives you some idea of what can be done, and especially how everything sounds when you start to apply things in a musical way. If you just practice your scales up and down, that's okay for a warm-up or to use it for your technical development, but you won't get better as a musician per se if you only practice technique. So you need to also practice improvisation. And there are so many benefits from practicing improvisation. You'll get better at rhythm, because if you're jamming to a backing track, you need to listen to the rhythm. Your listening skills get better, your ear gets trained, your technique gets applied. So multiple benefits to improvisation. And as I said, a really easy way is not to use the whole scale, but just to use 2 notes. For example, the highest 2 strings here, and I will record a little backing track here. That's really easy, and then we can use this exercise, and you will see that it don't necessarily sounds really complex what I'm playing here. So these are example licks that I just improvised with, but they are really simple things. And as I stated before, of course, if you don't know about these slides and hammer-ons and the blues band, then of course you can leave the techniques for now. But that's why the 7th most important thing to be focused on during the first year as a blues guitarist is to take those phrasing techniques and to add them to your scale notes and to your improvisation. And these are just a couple of examples, like the slides, the vibrato, the bendings. And the more we further these techniques, the more complex your blues guitar playing will sound. And of course there are many more things. That's why I recorded a second video, because this video would be too long to cover all the points. So you can subscribe to the channel, then you will see that video when I upload it to the channel. So the part 2 video of this part, because in total there are more points than these 7 that we covered here. And so I would say leave a comment below if you like this video, and also check out the free resources on bestbluesguitarlessonsonline.com, where you can find a free downloadable ebook on blues rhythm guitar playing, and there I'll take you through all the rhythm riffs you should know about, all the cool ways in which we can first learn the riffs and the chords that we need for great sounding blues parts.